So our Lion project is entitled Rebuilding the Pride. And really the focus of the project is trying to understand what contributed to the traditional coexistence between Maasai and predators, specifically lions initially. And what the centre's been great for is allowing us to bridge traditional knowledge from the local community with Western science. So really getting the best of both worlds. It's a meeting place that's brought us together with the community, so we can sit down and say, times are changing, some things need to change about the way you manage the land, the way you rotate your livestock, but what from the past has worked, and that's what this building and all the buildings around here have let us do, that is bringing together those two types of knowledge, and the community and the scientists to talk around issues and use traditional ecological knowledge and match it with scientific principles to understand the elements of that ecological knowledge that actually contribute to coexistence. I'd say probably the biggest challenge is maintaining it as community-based. For community-based conservation to work, it really needs to be a grassroots initiative. It needs to come up from the bottom. And there's often in Kenya, but even around the world, a corrupt level of elites that try and take that community initiative and manipulate it for their own gain. So really trying to maintain accountability throughout the community, and especially within the leadership itself, so that they don't hijack the community initiative. Similarly, stopping it outside influences such as tour operators coming in and saying, "Oh great, thank you very much, you've done a great job looking after this conservancy, we're going to pay you X million of shillings a year," and then they take control of the conservancy and the poor community are left with just a bit of income from the conservancy fees, but no access to grazing, and so that's been one of the main challenges. Another one is that in conservation there's a lot of fads or phases, just like there is in fashion or anything else, and as soon as something's not seen to be working, people want to move on to the next thing. So a lot of people haven't given community-based conservation the time that it needs to develop. After about 4 or 5 years, a project is only just starting to get going, but for a lot of donor organisations, that's the length of your average funding cycle. So come 4 or 5 years down the line, donors don't see that the project's achieving what they perceive it should, and so it just gets going and then funding gets cut. So not having adequate funding for long enough has been a huge, huge challenge.
I do think education is a central tool in the effort to save species. It is critically important, particularly here in the South Rift, where you see coexistence in a way that I've seen in very few other places, where people, cattle, lions, elephants have figured out how to coexist for hundreds and hundreds of years. Key to that is communication and sharing of information through education is absolutely essential. Just think about everything from understanding how grazing rights or how effective or productive the grazing is, measured by milk yields, where lions are and what the activity is like. All those things are absolutely essential to be able to be communicated quickly. And the neat thing here at Jenike is that there is a commitment to research, conservation, and livelihoods. Those work together, and I think improved education is the glue that holds them together. The sharing of information, whether that's in a formal school setting or outreach from here at the Resource Center, or whether that's a community meeting. It's important that community researchers, everyone have a voice in the process. What attracted me to the South Rift is the story of coexistence, seen through the traditional practices of the Maasai. when you look out over this incredible landscape of East Africa, areas where you find big congregations of wildlife, they're almost always on pastoral lands. So there is an understanding, a relationship that has existed, again, for many, many generations. And that definitely intrigued me. How does it occur? How do they sustain it? And what was also very amazing or interesting here in the South Rift is the conservation work to explore that relationship was community-based. It was from the ground up. It was the voices of the leaders of the community that were interested in sharing the knowledge of researchers that come in and taking the traditional knowledge and sharing it with researchers and with the community. So you have this unique relationship that has existed for generations, many generations here, that is unique. I've not seen other examples of it, particularly not in the U.S. Here, the wildlife is seen as a second cattle. So in times of drought or times when cattle become more difficult to manage, the wildlife through ecotourism and research become a source of revenue. So there's a relationship that has existed for hundreds of years that is growing into a modern relationship that I hope will preserve both the pastoral way of life as well as the wildlife, because the two are dependent on each other. You know, there are many definitions for community-based conservation, but in truth, it always starts from the ground up. The voice of the community is one that needs to be represented in the process. I think some of the lessons learned here in the South Rift are the opportunities that are presented may not be in the same order that you expect them, but that communities are willing to build trust, to have dedicated leaders that will work with the community in order to move projects forward. Here in the South Rift, the innovation was the first step was creating a voice for the landowners, for the pastoralists here, and the creation of the South Rift Landowners Association, Seralo. Once that was established and the community had a voice, then the other opportunities began to appear. And the challenge is, when you look out across any large community, is certainly the willingness to innovate, to try new things, the ability to build consensus. That's where true leaders, I think, are able to achieve great things. And again, here there's amazing people that are leading and working with this community. But there are always setbacks. In this ecosystem, you have to deal with human-wildlife conflict. It's never going to go away. So you have to be prepared to deal with it and not ignore it. And I think in doing so, you'll set up a system where the community can benefit from the wildlife. Economically, community-based conservation does need support. You need to build the skills, and you certainly need the right kind of economic incentive. And luckily here, with this incredible landscape, ecotourism can play a big role. Not on a grand scale, but on a more unique, smaller type of tourism for a more specialized client. And I think it's a real benefit.